Yeah, Cynthia, I'm actually really curious about the honors humanities class that you teach and how, I guess, how San Jose State decided to offer the course in this way. And I ask this because I was at UC Merced for a couple of years, and they tried to create an interdisciplinary course that, you know, on paper sounds very much like the humanities course that you're teaching, but it did not, you know, it didn't quite go over that effectively. They were trying to move away from this model where, in order to satisfy GE requirements, students have sort of like a list of all of these different classes they can take in like biological sciences, physical sciences, humanities, like arts and literature, et cetera. And then they pick and choose based on the classes. And Merced wanted to move away from that because they thought, well, we have to think interdisciplinarily now. Students need to figure out how all of these disciplines actually can work together and how they work, like what we can learn when we think interdisciplinarily. But and at least from my perspective and for many of the students who I was working with, the attempt at doing that still ended up replicating that model where it was like each week there was a different topic that was from a different discipline, and the lecturers had a very hard time making those links. So I'm really curious to hear more about how San Jose State came up with this model for the humanities class and why you think it's been so successful at San Jose State.
Yeah, well, we have the lower division humanities honors sequence is a 4-semester sequence, covers lots of GE also, and has been around for, at this point, 66 years. Next year will be 67. And there are a couple of things that I think are really different about the way that this team taught program come into existence. My daughter went to another university, Scripps College, one of the Claremont colleges, and they had a 1-year sequence, which was more like what you've just described, that they were doing for a while maybe at UC Merced. The professorial team really has to commit to learning all the material. So even if they're a specialist in X, they have to learn W and Z and Q and whatever else, right? And so for most professors, it is a steep learning curve because we're trained as academics to be specialists, not generalists. And the expectation is you still maintain your specialties, but you have to become very much a generalist with respect to everything else. And in fact, some people after like a year or two say, I'm not going to continue because it's just so demanding. But for those of us who continue, it's all about being egalitarian, being part of a teaching team. And that when we give, the way it's divided is that it's a lecture component and then a seminar component, and the 4 professors for the lower division. And in the case of the upper division, it's only 1 year and it's 2 professors. You're in one professor's seminar, and then you get the other professor the second semester for the seminar, or the third or the fourth if there are 4 of them. And then they take turns every semester giving all of the presentations for the lectures. And the presentations are intended to make allusions to the earlier presentations, that we're supposed to be paying attention to each other so that we can say, remember when Professor so-and-so talked about this? Here's what that looks like in this context, right? Here's something that you can see how it connects up in this context. And even in seminar, so if my PhD is not in ancient Roman history, I nonetheless need to be able to talk about ancient Roman history, having not only read the primary texts, but done some additional work, right, looking at secondary sources and so on, to be able to have some depth, to be able to refer to whatever is going on. And everybody does that. And so it really requires cultivating, on the part of the professors, cultivating an academic attitude where we do things together and nobody's a prima donna. And we have to learn what we don't know to be able to do it well enough to present it in a meaningful way to our students. And occasionally when we don't, we simply, I don't know about that, right? This is something like, this is a good question and I don't know. Let's see what we can find out, right? And that honesty, I think, is also significant, right? We have to be honest about what we don't know as well as what we were comfortable with. But it's the thing that is the hardest, I would suggest, to create. As one of my colleagues from, who's a rhetorician, he's in the Department of Comm Studies, he said he never had to work with colleagues the way he had to work with colleagues in the team taught honors program, right? And he said, it was awesome. Once you get the hang of it, it's absolutely awesome because, you learn from one another. You cannot help it. I'm always learning from my colleagues, right? Not only from and of course from my students, because they have ideas and questions and they take us in different directions with whatever it is we're exploring. But you get to be in awe of people in terms of learning this way and teaching this way. And I don't know, that's the best part of it, I think, right? It is truly what I think real education is about. Education means, comes from a Latin root that means to lead out. And when we're all in it together, it's all about, what is there? Let's find out more. Let's explore deeply. What did you understand there? Well, what did you bring to this, right? I mean, and you bring it all together that way. And it's just awe-inspiring. You cannot help but be, right? And people who teach in the program who kind of get it, right, have always said, this is some of the best teaching experiences I've ever had in my life, right? Because we're teaching and learning everybody together, right? And I think that's the really big difference. And we talk about, well, what are the presentations we're going to give this semester? And if someone were to come through the class several times, for example, you'd see that the lectures are not the same every year or every semester. Like 2 or 3 of them change up, right? And then maybe the next semester or the next year, when that same semester rolls around, something else changes up, right?